Hello, thanks for joining us. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll can't touch Howard Stern's private parts. And to think, we almost had him in Canada.
When I was in Detroit and my station went country, which was a real bad time in my life, I got an offer. Was the station Chum FM? Yeah, that was the station. I was in touch with the program director there, and he said to me, he called me up and he said, I've heard about you. I've heard what you're doing in Detroit. I think you'd be good here. And he offered me a job, and I said, do I get paid in American money or Canadian money? He said, Canadian money. I said, wow, that's such a major commitment. Wow, that's a whole different world. I was like, my hands were shaking. And I actually thought very seriously about moving there. I thought it would have been a good place for me, but I went to Washington, D.C. Sort of my goal was to get to New York, so it seemed like I was getting geographically closer.
Now, Howard, you know that I know that you found out what the Canadian dollar was worth.
You're absolutely right. I found out, wait a second, this is not such a good way to make a living. No, it just freaked me out. It was like, it hit me that it was a whole nother country, you know? I was like, wow, I was doing radio in another country. And also, you know, I said, gee, would it go over there? And I said, of course it would go over there. I mean, you know, I think my act would go over anywhere. One of the reasons I'm still in radio, it frustrates me that there are so many guys out there stealing my personality. They're actually doing what I do and getting credit for it. That somewhere in Canada, there's a guy, you know, the Bob and Jaime show, or whatever his name is sitting there having this team that's basically listening to the tapes of my show and ripping it off. And I've noticed that whenever I go into a new market, because I'm constantly starting new markets, we shoot to #1, because I think when you're the original, when you're the originator, somehow people get hip to that. They understand it, and I think I'll always win out. So one day, I will come to Canada, and I will be successful there.
Howard Stern may have chosen Washington and New York over Toronto, but after 4 frustrating years of trying to bring his story to the movies, it took the combined talent of producer Ivan Reitman and screenwriter Lenny Bloom to finally make the journey to the big screen.
6 years ago, when he first came to Los Angeles on the air, and after a few months of listening to him, I said, boy, this guy is unusual. And he was like a relief when I would drive to work every morning. And I decided to call him up, really out of the blue. And in fact, the last time I did anything like that was on Animal House, when I sort of, I looked at the National Lampoon magazine's masthead and called up the publisher and said, you know, we ought to make a movie together. And that's how Animal House came out. I called him up and said, hey, you ought to be in pictures. And he said, oh, thank God you called. Everybody hates me in Hollywood. I couldn't believe anybody with, you know, your reputation would actually phone me up. And we became friends.
What was your vision based on?
I think Howard's success is based on he's one of the smartest guys in any room. And his comedy comes from a very intelligent person seeing what's going on, processing it through his own intelligence, and coming out with something. I said to him 6 years ago, I said, your first film, and this is about 3 years before, or 2 years before Private Parts, the book, came out, your first film should be somewhat biographical. You should play yourself. It should be quite naturalistic in tone, maybe even a documentary kind of thing. It should be as intelligent as possible. And sort of listened to me and said, yeah, it sounds good, and we just chatted. But a year later, he says, I've got it. I've got the movie for us. And I said, what's that? He said, The Adventures of Fart Man. I said, I don't think that's what I was talking about. He said, no, it's going to be great. I passed on that one. There's a tendency to undervalue what Howard really does, his real intelligence. And so they wrote down to him instead of writing up to him. And, you know, the screenplays were dumb.
Well, I was lucky that Ivan Reitman was a fan of my radio show, and he was also a fan of the book. I had done some interviews with him on my radio show. And I called him up and I said, look, I mean, certainly you don't have to do this for me, but would you read these scripts and just tell me, am I crazy? I think these are bad scripts. And who do you respect more than Ivan? I mean, Ghostbusters, Twins, you know, Animal House, Meatballs, Stripes, you name it. He read the scripts, he said, you're absolutely right. If you do these movies, you will be the laughing stock of the world. They will not make money. Your instincts are correct. He says, here's how I would make the movie. And he started to lay it out. And I mean, in a stroke of brilliance, he would just, like in one sort of like an epiphany. I mean, he would just see the movie.
So I started working with Len Bloom, another great Canadian. And he had worked with me on a biography of the Marx Brothers, which we never ended up making. But it was a great script. And I felt, solved many of the kinds of problems that you have in a movie like this, where you're trying to distill 40 years of experience into a 2-hour experience. And Right away, we knew that his voice was very important as a kind of structural device. And basically, that's the script we started, and it got...
Two of you are painting a picture for me. It's your fantasy, you're describing. Don't say sheer on panties, just do me this favor and just say panties. You can say little panties, panties. But you're painting a picture. That's what it's all about, is painting us a picture. So it's still energized, but it's sexy.
Her attitude, her spirit of collaboration. I'd walk in some days and she'd say to me, okay, we're doing this scene. I said, Betty, I got great ideas for the scene. I want to do this, this, and this. I want to change it around. She'd say to me, fine. You give me what's on the page one time and then go wild. Do whatever you want. And that kind of freedom, you know, that experimental attitude is what I think. When I wrote my book, I never imagined it would be a Hollywood film. Absolutely could not imagine. It was one of the most difficult things I ever did, to write a book. And when it was done, Hollywood came knocking. And they said, we're going to turn this into a movie. And I said, how? I don't see how you can do it. So I signed with a studio, and I went through, I was smart. I had script approval. That was the one smart thing I did. I went through 22 scripts over a 2-year period. And they would come to me and said, you know, you cost us millions of dollars. Why are you doing this? You know you're afraid to make this picture. You're scared. I said, I'm not scared to do anything. I said, I'm the guy who flew down on MTV and bared his butt cheeks to the world, and they're not pretty. I said, I'm not afraid of anything. I said, I'm afraid of doing a bad movie if I'm afraid of anything. And these movies are bad. And as many millions of you spent developing this script, it's going to cost you more to make this movie, and it's going to be a bomb. It's going to be horrible. It's not going to be funny. It's not going to be touching. It's not going to be real. And these scripts were over the top. I mean, I'd come home from work, Richard Simmons, the exercise guru, is running through my house, babysitting my kids, and yelling at me. I said, who wants to see this? I am so sick of these comedies that have been coming out. Everything's a bad Saturday Night Live sketch. Coneheads. You've got these movies that mean nothing to people, that don't touch them. There's no storyline. The cast of Friends is making movies now, and they're the same character in Friends that they are in the movies. There really hasn't been too many good comedies. And I said, I have an idea in my head what the tone of this thing should be. And you guys aren't hitting it with these scripts. I can't tell you how to do it. I'm not a screenwriter, but I know you're not hitting it. I had never seen this movie with an audience. I had no idea what the reaction was going to be. I believed it was a good film. I had hoped for the best, and I wanted people to leave saying it was funny. So I sit down in these theaters, and my hands were shaking. I'm not kidding. I don't get nervous by much, but this was pretty heavy. And the theater is packed with people, real people who eat popcorn during a movie, you know? And they have cards, and they fill out little cards afterwards. I had no idea what a test screening was. And we're sitting there, and I'm watching, and I'm listening to them laugh, and they broke into applause 23 times. 23 times. When's the last time I went to a movie people started applauding? Like, they'd be laughing, and all of a sudden they go... And I'm sitting there, Ivan, and I'm going, I don't believe this. This is great, but who knows? So they stick you in a back room afterwards. I mean, talk about magic. The guy from Paramount walks in the research company, and their hands are shaking. They go, this is the highest testing movie in Paramount history. You tested higher than Forrest Gump and Indiana Jones. And I said, you're kidding. And Ivan turns to me, he says, you don't understand. I've done 15 movies. I've never had a test this high. And I'm going, you're kidding. He goes, remember this moment, because it's never going to happen again. This is an impossible moment. First time out of the box, you hit a home run. And then they give you the sheets to read, what people write down. They said, this is the funniest movie I've ever seen. It touched me, and it inspired me to follow my dreams. And hilarious I had hoped for, inspiring somebody's dreams, I never could have imagined. I even get chills right now thinking about it, because to me, to make a film is probably the highlight of my life. The acting occurs in my real life, when I'm off mic. I know when I'm on mic, that's the real me. I know it, that's the man that is in my head that wants to get out. And I know that right now you're having an internal dialogue in your head, I'm having an internal dialogue. That's who we really are. And when I get on that mic, I know that's really me. When I go home, when I'm with my boss, whatever it is I'm doing the rest of the day, I feel like I'm a hypocrite and a liar. I feel like I'm not telling the truth. I feel like I'm acting there. So if I am a good actor, I'm acting 20 hours a day. It's 4 hours a day that I'm not. I can go on the air, and I can tell my audience that I pleasure myself at night. I then go home to my wife. My wife hears the radio show, and she says, tell me something. Do you really do this at night? Do you please yourself sexually? I go, no. No, I don't. I'm lying to her. She goes, but I heard you say on the radio. I go, oh, I was lying to my audience. I go on, now I'm telling the truth to my audience. But I'm play acting in front of my wife. And then it gets weird. If she saw this interview we were doing, she says, wait a second, you just told that guy you do pleasure yourself. Then she said, wait a second, are you doing it? I go, no, honey, I'm not. So it's like we have to hide everything in real life. And that radio show is so liberating and free that that's where reality is for me.
You are now a rich, famous man. You are a husband and the father of 3 daughters. Is it still important, if I may paraphrase you, to spit in the face of every jerk-off in Hollywood who said, I wouldn't make it, I couldn't do it, I can't have it? Do you really, quote, consider everyone in Hollywood an asshole who wants you to fail and does not want this movie to succeed?
Maybe it's a character flaw, I don't know, but I still very much feel that way. I do not feel famous, I do not feel successful, and maybe that's what keeps me going. I often think that, like, you know, Quentin Tarantino made Pulp Fiction, and now we never hear from him again. It's almost like he got caught up in the moment. He goes, hey, I made Pulp Fiction, now I'll go to parties the rest of my life and say, I swear to you, if I'm signing 25,000 books, or whatever it is, I don't get carried away with the moment. I don't feel like I'm anything special. I always kind of feel like a piece of garbage.
Howard, at what point do you enjoy it?
I don't enjoy it necessarily. I don't sit there and revel in it. I don't go, wow, look at all the things I've done. I don't feel all that special. Right now, I got to admit, I feel totally vindicated because I know there are people in Hollywood, getting back to your original point, who think I'm a jerk, who don't, you know, they don't really listen to the show. They listen with half an ear and they think that there's no intelligence or wit behind the program. And now that even people are coming out of this saying, wow, this is a really great film, I do feel vindicated. I do feel good that I can say to my father, I'm not a moron. I can say to those people in Hollywood who are afraid to do business with me, look what we did. We created a good film. Will it do a lot of business at the box office? I don't know, but I know we created a good film.